Minecraft doesn't have a lot of animated textures, and the ones that it does have animated are weird. Like Prismarine's animated to go from blue to green, and the different nether stems that you find are animated, but furnaces aren't. And I think we should fix that. And just looking at this resource pack for animated furnaces, I think it makes these a lot more interesting. And not just to give you something to look at while you're smelting your diamonds, you know, a common occurrence, but to also give little bits of personality to the 3 different furnace types. Oh, and also I gotta give respect to this pack for changing the blast furnace's bottom to be a unique texture. They had the strength to do what Mojang couldn't. In recent updates, our potions look pretty different, but that's just the colors. And honestly, I think we can go even further, because really, unless you have these memorized, it's still pretty tough to tell which is which, especially if you have something like color blindness. So, to make it more accessible and easier to see in a pinch, I think what Zally's does here with the potion pack is really interesting, since for this instance, each of the potions would have a different texture depending on what it was. And that's not where it just stops, but they also play off of that and give it different textures for the different modifiers as well. Like take an instant health potion getting even bigger the more health that it's going to restore, or having it look like this if it's going to give you more duration. But what I like most about this is that they give unique textures to the mundane, thick, and awkward potions. I mean, even Mojang couldn't do that. I mean, come on, what's the point of having these different potion types if you're not going to give them a little bit of love in another texture? That's something I appreciate. Minecraft doesn't have a lot of 3D textures. Instead, they often just make their textures 3D, with this weird cross shape that they'll lay out. And while that's all fine and good for performance, I think if they were really looking to change things up, then following up through the steps of Ninth World's Crops 3D pack would be really cool. Adding in the different variations of crops in different 3D space. I mean, I'm not someone who goes for beetroots a lot, but when they look like this, I'm at least gonna give them a shot. And if I really had to pick, I'd think I would say that the carrot models are my favorite. But that's also tough to choose because each of our saplings look different here as well. And if they don't do it with all the crops overall, I think at the very least seeing something like this for the sweet berry bushes would be a nice touch. Because the way they look here, I can at least understand why I'm getting poked and prodded when I'm moving slowly through them. The original texture just wasn't cutting it for me. Currently, if you want to give your bed some personality, you gotta dye it, which more often than not just seems like a hassle. It's an extra step before you're able to go to sleep, which I think none of us are looking to do. But with the benefits that we get from something like this pack, it's at least easier to see the kind of detail that you're adding. And by having unique designs on top of all the beds like this, it not only gives you a reason to go through and look through all the beds to find your favorite, instead of just settling for a white bed from the white sheep that you just sheared. But I think an even cooler implementation of this would be doing something like the glazed terracotta to the regular terracotta. Having it be an extra step where if you want to, you can get some cool detail and designs, but if you don't, no sweat it. You can get the smooth texture just the same. I mean, really, this is all in service of us just getting banner patterns added onto the beds. That seems like such a layup already, but if we can't get that, I'd take this as a happy medium. What if instead of Minecraft just having different fence types, it had different types of fences? And what I mean by that is taking after what you and Howl did here and giving each of the different wood types of fences their own distinct design. I mean, the same already happens for our doors and trapdoors, so it would at least make some logical sense to happen like this. And while these already look great as a replacement, I think having these as an addition to our regular fences could be even better. I mean, after all, builders are always looking for new textures and types to build with, so why would you take one away when you could add one and be the hero to both camps? Unless you have a cape, your Minecraft Elytra looks pretty boring. And really, unless you have a special cape, it still looks pretty boring. Most of us already have these ones that were given away for free. So to instead switch that up, what I think is done here with the improved Elytras pack is pretty cool. Being able to dye them to each of the different 16 wool types, which by itself would already give us plenty of variation to do with these, especially if they added in things like the armor trims or even putting banner patterns on top of these. And then for the final bit of detail that they add in that I love, they let it so that you can rename it to the Phantom Elytra and have it mix the textures of the Phantom's wings, which for being able to repair these with Phantom Membrane makes a lot of sense in my mind. It's also probably the only time I've ever been happy to see a Phantom, so that's gotta be worth something too. Minecraft's deserts feel, well, deserted. And I know, right? Duh. But as someone who lives in a desert, there's actually a lot of interesting foliage that can happen in these places. And I think they're just taking a page out of the Moe's Desert Bloom resource pack. We can see that without adding in any new blocks, we're able to get a lot more variety to what these deserts are. And what I particularly like here is that we get different variations depending on whether they're in the Badlands or the desert biome. And really, it wasn't until looking at this that I realized just how often the dead bush texture is used within Minecraft. And seeing different variations for the taiga and swamp variants as well, that's a nice touch. And besides, with recent world generation, deserts have already gotten a lot more rare. We should make them feel a little bit more special to find. Like an oasis instead of a placeholder. Did you know that in real life, oak trees don't grow apples? Yeah, apparently the tree that does is called, coincidentally, an apple tree. Hard to miss that one. And that's not the only tree issue that we have inside of the game. And I think the idea here of changing in the different saplings to be the corresponding seed for the different trees is a really fun idea. For one, it makes more sense when they're falling from the leaves that you're breaking, but two, it gives us the best of both worlds. We get a unique item texture to play around with in item frames, and when you place it down, you still get that iconic organic sapling for things like flower pots, which when you get the intersection of both of things working together, that's an idea that I'm going to sign off on. Minecraft's built on a grid-based system, and it gets painfully obvious when you look at a wall of iron blocks or polished stones like this. With each one of those blocks having their own border, it really starts to look too repetitive. So taking after this idea of having the textures connect could really be special. And really, you just need to take one look at your library with this change to see how much of an impact it would make. The bookshelves look a lot better when you have more storage to actually store the books and not get divided all the time. And for me personally, I really like how this looks with the Frogland example that we see here. That way we don't necessarily need to have new blocks to play around with in building. Just using the old ones that we're familiar with gets us a whole bunch of new options. And that's something I think is worth exploring. And adding on to the idea of textures of the same block connecting together, they also add in a great feature where the textures are able to overlap on top of nearby ones. Like take this example where the stone bricks are placed next to cobblestone. Now like this, it doesn't really look like they're doing much together. It really just looks like you ran out of stone bricks and had to patch the wall quickly. But when the textures overlay like this example and stay true, then it doesn't look like a haphazard job, but rather that the wall's decaying and you're seeing the inside of the cobblestone wall, which is a lot cooler. And really, I think the only issue that would come from this in the base game is that you can't choose whether or not you want it to look like this or not. Because don't get me wrong, for the other option, there is times that you want that texture to blend like this instead of overlaying like this. So if this got added into Minecraft, I would also like to see it with the option to choose between which one that you want. Minecraft has a wide variety of plants, but those plants themselves don't have much variety to speak on. I mean, every sunflower that you place down is gonna look the exact same. And I think the idea of having different variations to the plants that we see growing out in the fields, without having to change much at all of the world generation code itself. And after all, we already got a whole bunch of overhauls in 1.18, so I'm not pitching that, but getting something even smaller like this to get a lot of benefit, I think that's always worth it. And particularly seeing the differences in the crop fields that we're planting out in the farms, yeah, I really like that. And seeing that in the base game, that's just a no-brainer in my eyes. Minecraft's different entities can get pretty small, but as small as those get, they don't always have the textures that match them. And so that's where we need to start talking about pixel-consistent textures. For example, look at the difference between the experience orbs here and the ones that you would find in the Vanilla Tweaks resource pack. Or look at how much cuter the bat seems when you actually have it with a pixel-consistent texture. And you can see similar changes going the other way for things like the Wither and the Elder Guardian, which in my opinion not only makes it look nicer, but it also keeps it consistent with the other entities that had this from the beginning. At that point, it just seems fair. And we shouldn't just expect variety up on the surface, since with this example, we'd be able to go down to the different mines and find special versions of the ores depending on where they generate it. So if that coal ore was next to a bunch of granite, it's not going to stick out like a sore thumb, but instead it'll blend in quite nicely. And while I love how this looks, it might make it a little tougher to read the textures that were added in for colorblind support in the first place. But I also wouldn't object to getting proper colorblind support options inside of the accessibility menu anyway. So if we got this and that as a twofer, I think that could please a lot of fans. At the very least, it'd be pleasing aesthetically. Minecraft's wolf is iconic, and part of that is because it's the only one to choose from. Kinda hard to lose the competition when you're the only one competing. And while we've talked in the past about getting different dog breeds inside of Minecraft, it is worth noting that as cool as that would be, wolves and dogs are technically different. But hey, wolves also have different breeds too. So, since we already get this kind of love given to our cats and ocelots, I would love to see the same kind of love come to our canine companions. And personally, my favorite part of this resource pack example is the different nether breeds that you can get as well. I mean, look at the wither skeleton version of the dog and tell me that you don't want that in the base game. Or if they won't add in that, then at least just add in the Cerberus version of the dog. Then you get 3 in 1. Hard to argue with that. In a previous build hacks video, we showed off using invisible item frames to give your own kind of jack-o'-lantern faces to pumpkins. And while that original post is a great bit of creativity, I also think it should serve as a great bit of inspiration for Mojang to use in their next texture update. Being able to have random variety, or even choose which one of the patterns that you want to add on top of a pumpkin, that would be awesome. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised that they haven't added in the feature to put a creeper face on top of a pumpkin already. That just seems like a layup. And then on top of that, animating the jack-o'-lanterns so that they have a little bit more personality, that would be fun too. Especially if it carried over to the snow golems that we spawn with these pumpkins. Did you know dolphins are neutral mobs? Yeah, it caught me off guard too. And in fairness, I've never exactly tried to get on their bad side, but when they look like a killer whale, maybe I'd believe it a little bit more. And what this resource pack does is add in new mob variety to our neutral mobs. On top of just mob variety in general, there's really a lot of cool stuff to look at here. I particularly like the changes to the fox. That's really cute. And hey, adding a few of these in made it a lot more exciting to trap every mob, and a lot more tedious. Sorry for whoever wants to try that one. I would love to see the video though. These planks might not look all that different, but when you zoom in close, there's actually a little bit of depth that gets added in. And that's just scratching the surface of how much stuff this makes 3D. Like the items and plants that were used to just being completely flat, now have their own 3D model associated with them. And I think for plants specifically, this would work really nice. I mean, it's a lot better than just 2D textures overlaid in a cross formation. And when you see these layout in your hotbar as well, it's hard to deny that they fit in better with the blocks, even if it is a little bit cursed to see on the first time you see it. It's definitely not familiar, but it's also pretty cool. The Enderman is the only mob that can spawn in every one of the 3 dimensions, but they always look the same, and this pack solves that, since now not only do Endermen have a new cool design associated with them, but they'll also look differently depending on where they spawn. So if you see one in a warped forest, it'll be bluish in color, but find one out in the rest of the nether, and it'll be red. And I think that gives her a really cool look, if not a little terrifying, but that's also what kind of makes them cool. And while I can't say there's really any time that I'm happy to see an Enderman, if they looked like this, I'd at least be a little appreciative before I avert my eyes so that I don't anger it. With all the texture updates that Minecraft's received over the years, there's been shockingly little attention given to our chests. But adding in a tweak like this could be all that they need, since now we not only give the chest a more modern texture, but we also add in more detail when you open it up. It's not just a black box, there's actually empty space in there, and I think that looks a lot better personally. And especially look at this detail with the ender chest. Here it's a portal inside, and I think that's adorable. And while this example looks great with the nether portal, I could also see this working out with the end portal texture as well. I mean, it'd be a fun bit of lore to add either way, a lot better than just some random ring in the middle of the open chest. Torches in vanilla are not very exciting. I mean, hold one in your hand and it barely looks like anything's there, just a few pixels jutting out of the bottom of your screen. But with this reimagined change, not only do they fill up more of our screen as we hold them up to illuminate, but they'll also have their own fire animated texture on the top of the flame, which I think looks really nice. And there's even changes to redstone torches as well, giving them an ambient glow to the top instead of just being dark when you hold them in your inventory. And especially if we were to see this change along with something like dynamic brightness mods, where they can actually illuminate the world around you, I think both of those would be really cool to see. There are many players that swear that original Minecraft was meant to be a horror game, and while I think it's hard to find much scary about a game where pigs look like this, but the kind of changes that we're seeing here, I'm a little bit more inclined to believe it. And while some of these mobs go completely off the rails, like, I don't think a ghast like this should ever be in Minecraft, at least if I want to sleep at night. What we do see with the changes to the spiders and the creepers, and especially the phantoms, I think those are some really nice touches. Even just adding something as simple as glowing eyes to these mobs makes them so much more terrifying. And if that was partnered with harder difficulties, that could be a fun touch. Now it's not just hard for the difficulty's sake, but also for the psychological side. Good luck. Once you carry up to 16 arrows in your inventory, it'll now look like a quiver. And that's thanks to this revamped archery change, which I already personally love the idea of textures changing when there's enough items stacked on top. I mean, a pile of arrows looks different than just one arrow in your inventory. But then to have that partner with these tiny tweaks that we get to how our bows and crossbows look, I think it winds up really nice. I mean, if anything, I just like the fact that the rocket's finally centered, since the way that it was before in your hotbar, it just looks weird. And having a little bit of gray along the outside of the arrow tip also works nice. I mean, you make them of flint, so it's a nice touch if you ask me. Now, I love the sound of rain, and given how many views there are on ASMR videos, I'm guessing more than a few of you do too. But I also hate looking at rain in Minecraft. Not only does it lower the bitrate of videos, but it also hurts your performance, which overall makes it pretty obtrusive to play with this on. So having a change like this where the rain starts to become semi-transparent to translucent would not only be more realistic, but also a lot more enjoyable to play around with. And the same happening to snow too. And here they also lower the particle count to reduce noise, which I gotta say I also appreciate. I don't want to feel like I'm playing in a static TV. This is a lot more pleasant for my winter wonderland. I love Suspicious Stew as an item, but I also don't like being suspicious. And so if you're like me and you don't like the roulette game, then having the option to have a pack like this where you can visualize which potion effects is inside of the stew is pretty nice. Now, if we were to get this in vanilla, I would be hesitant with the current implementation. I mean, the textures look great, but they also give away the whole mechanic of the Suspicious Stew. But maybe the ability to craft it with another ingredient that could let you see what's inside, that'd be nice. Or maybe the stews get less suspicious when you craft them yourselves, instead of finding them in a shipwreck chest. After all, if I know what's in it, I don't want to be guessing what I put in. That makes sense to me. Minecraft has a surprising amount of things you can put in a bucket, but it's a shame that when you put a tropical fish inside, which has a multitude of different variants to see, they all look like the same texture. And so having a fix so that we can tell which of the fish that we're putting inside the bucket, I think that'd be great. Plus, it gives us new sprite textures to play around with, which for builders who like item frames or armor stands is also another joy. I see this as a win-win, or a fin-fin in this case. Yeah, I don't know if you put that. Minecraft's birch forests haven't got a lot of love, and that's not helped by the fact that when Mojang showed off changes to the birch forest for the wild update, they then went back on that saying that concept art isn't a promise, and that's a whole can of worms that I don't want to unpack here. But if they're not going to change how these birch biomes spawn, then they can at least change how they look, at least part of the time. And taken after this example where the birch forest could go into an autumn style for the birch, that'd be really pretty. I mean, for one, it gives us some new color of leaves that we've never had to play around with, plus a unique looking sapling and and grass type that matches as well. I mean, come on, you place some pumpkins next to this, it looks great. I think that speaks for itself. And while you could add this in with some kind of seasons feature, I think even just having a version of the birch forest that's permanently locked in autumn could give builders way more to play around with in the color palette. They got acacia for their orange planks, and autumn birch for their orange leaves. It works out to me. Light in Minecraft is a useful thing, but it's not always a comfort. I mean, sure, it's nice that no mobs are gonna spawn, but it only takes one look at something like the warm glow feature added in through vanilla tweaks. We can make our torches and light sources feel so much more comforting. And while I would personally like to see this done in a way where torches give off a different warmth when compared to things like soul lanterns or sea lanterns, I think even the change as is better than what we have in vanilla. So I would take it across the board instead of not at all. Minecraft stone bricks don't make a lot of sense. And because of the way that the texture repeats itself, the bricks often seem confused as to where they're actually placed. This fixes that. And now, if you look at the top of a stone brick block, you're not going to see any variation between the different bricks. And while this is initially cursed to start looking at, when you see it in practice built like so into the walls, I actually think it looks quite nice. And this way, we still get the stone brick texture to play around with, but also get some new stone textures to use as well. I can't say that wouldn't be a nice middle ground, and it looks a lot better in the floor as well, at least if you ask me. Gold armor really never gets a use. And while the addition of piglin barding might mean that you're wearing a pair of golden boots, that still doesn't have much to say for the other pieces of the armor. And so to change that, I think taking after vanilla tweaks and making the golden helmet into a golden crown would be a really nice touch. For one, we barely get any variation between most of the helmets anyway, so it'd be nice to switch it up, but I also particularly like how this looks when mobs spawn with it. Like, take a look at this skeleton wearing a golden crown. Now that's not just a skeleton with armor, but it's a skeleton with a story. Probably one with a tragic fate. But this is also one that I personally play around with on our server. I just really like the look of it. And it would make it nice to join the gold head group if we all could be kings instead of wearing the worst armor in the game. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?